German Shepherd was left to die in a deadly snowstorm. What baby did next left everyone in tears. The story you're about to listen will break your heart and then put it back together again. Like and share if this touches your soul, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The snowstorm howled like a ghost trapped between the trees, slamming against the windows, burying the world in silence. And then, a faint cry. Almost too weak to be real. Winterbrook had seen many brutal winters, but this one promised to be different. The small town nestled between mountains and forests was no stranger to snow, but the weather forecast had been using words like unprecedented and life-threatening all week. The residents had taken notice, emptying grocery store shelves and filling their tanks with gas. Better safe than sorry. In the Carter household, preparations were already underway. Eleanor Carter moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, counting canned goods and checking the battery supply. Her husband Daniel was in the garage, making sure the generator was ready in case the power went out. They had lived in Winterbrook long enough to know how quickly things could turn dangerous. "Mommy, how much snow will there be?" 5-year-old Liam asked, his small face pressed against the living room window. Outside, the first heavy flakes were already beginning to fall, dancing in the twilight. Eleanor glanced over at her son, his golden hair catching the warm light from the table lamp. "Enough to build 10 snowmen, sweetie," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The weather report had mentioned 3 feet, maybe more. "Can we build one tomorrow?" Liam's eyes lit up with excitement. "We'll see," Eleanor replied, knowing full well they might not be able to open the door tomorrow, let alone build a snowman. "Why don't you help me count these batteries?" But Liam's attention had already drifted back to the window. The snowfall was getting heavier by the minute, the wind picking up speed. The world outside was transforming, white blanketing everything in sight. The street lamps flickered on, creating glowing halos in the swirling snow. Daniel walked in, rubbing his hands together. "Generator's good to go. Got the fireplace ready too, just in case." He looked at his wife, their eyes meeting in silent understanding. This storm wasn't just another winter inconvenience. "Daddy, it's getting really loud outside," Liam said, still not moving from his spot by the window. Daniel nodded, walking over to ruffle his son's hair. "That's just the wind showing off, nothing to worry about." The lights flickered once, twice. Eleanor reflexively reached for the flashlight on the counter. But then the power steadied, and she relaxed her grip. "I think we should have an early dinner tonight," she suggested. "And then maybe we can all watch a movie together before bed." Liam didn't respond. His small hands were pressed flat against the cold glass now, his breath creating misty patches that quickly disappeared. "Liam?" Eleanor called. "Did you hear what I said?" "Mommy?" Liam's voice was different now, quieter, concerned. "There's something outside. It needs help." Eleanor exchanged a glance with Daniel, children and their imaginations. "Honey, nothing's out there except snow. Come help me set the table." But Liam didn't move. His eyes remained fixed on something outside. "No, Mommy, look." His finger pointed to a spot near their driveway. "Something's moving. It's stuck in the snow." Daniel moved to the window, peering out into the gathering darkness. The snowfall had intensified, making it difficult to see anything clearly. "I don't see anything, buddy. Probably just the wind blowing some branches around." "No!" Liam's voice rose with unusual urgency. "It's there!" It moved again. "Please, Daddy, look!" There was something in his son's voice that made Daniel look more carefully. He squinted, trying to make out shapes in the white chaos outside. For a moment, he saw nothing. Then, a slight movement. Something dark against the white. It could have been a shadow, a trick of the light. "I still don't," Daniel began, but then stopped. There it was again. A subtle shift in the snow, something darker than it should be. "See? See?" Liam pressed, his breath coming faster now. "It needs help, Daddy!" Eleanor joined them at the window, her brow furrowed. "What are you two looking at?" Before either could answer, a sound cut through the howling wind, faint but unmistakable. A whimper, weak, pained, and definitely not the wind. Liam's eyes widened. "Did you hear that? Something's crying." Daniel's expression changed. "I heard it too." Eleanor frowned, her protective instincts immediately kicking in. "It's probably just an animal, a fox maybe, or a stray cat." Nothing we should worry about with this storm coming. But it sounds hurt, Liam insisted, his eyes filling with tears. We have to help it. Another whimper, slightly louder this time. Eleanor heard it too, and something in her chest tightened. Daniel, you're not thinking of going out there, are you? The storm is already... But Daniel was already moving towards the coat rack. I'll just take a quick look, 5 minutes tops. He grabbed his heavy winter coat and a flashlight from the drawer. Stay inside with Liam. Daniel! Eleanor's voice was sharp with concern. The temperature is dropping fast. It's not safe. I'll be right back, he promised, zipping up his coat. If it's nothing, I'll come right back in. Liam rushed to the door, his small face tight with worry. Please save it, Daddy. Daniel gave his son a reassuring smile. I'll see what it is, buddy. No promises, okay? He opened the front door, and immediately a gust of icy wind and snow blasted into the warm house. The temperature difference was shocking. Daniel squinted against the onslaught, his breath visible in the frigid air. Be careful, Eleanor called after him, one arm around Liam, who was practically bouncing with anxiety. Daniel stepped out into the storm, the snow already halfway up his boots. The wind threatened to knock him off balance, but he steadied himself and pointed his flashlight toward where they had seen the movement. At first, all he could see was swirling white. The beam of light illuminated nothing but falling snow and the vague shapes of their yard. He took a few cautious steps forward, the cold already seeping through his jeans. Hello? He called, feeling slightly foolish. If it was an animal, it wouldn't exactly answer back. Another step. And then he heard it again, a weak, pitiful whine. Closer now. Daniel moved his flashlight in the direction of the sound, taking a few more careful steps through the deepening snow. And then he saw it. Half buried in a snowdrift, a large shape lay nearly motionless. Daniel's heart skipped a beat as the flashlight beam revealed the unmistakable form of a dog, a German shepherd by the looks of it, its dark fur matted with ice and snow. The animal's eyes were barely open, unfocused, and its breathing was shallow and labored. Occasional shivers ran through its body, but they seemed to be growing weaker by the moment. Oh, God, Daniel whispered. The dog was clearly on the verge of freezing to death. From the doorway, Liam called out, What is it, Daddy? Did you find it? Stay inside, Daniel shouted back, not taking his eyes off the dog. The animal didn't react to his voice or the light. It was bad, very bad. Daniel knelt in the snow beside the German shepherd. Up close, he could see how emaciated it was, ribs clearly visible beneath its wet fur. This wasn't just a dog caught in a storm. This animal had been suffering for some time. Hey there, he said softly, reaching out a gloved hand. The dog's eyes flickered toward him, but there was no energy for fear or aggression, just a dull, pained awareness. You're in rough shape, aren't you? A particularly strong gust of wind nearly knocked Daniel sideways. The temperature was plummeting by the minute. He knew he couldn't stay out much longer, and the dog definitely wouldn't survive the night in these conditions. Daniel made a decision. He carefully slid his arms under the large dog, surprised at how light it felt despite its size. The animal offered no resistance as Daniel lifted it from the snow. A bad sign. A healthy German shepherd would never let a stranger pick it up so easily. The dog's body was ice cold, its breathing increasingly shallow. Daniel turned and trudged back toward the house, where Eleanor and Liam were waiting at the door, their faces anxious. Liam's eyes widened as Daniel approached with his burden. A doggie! You found a doggie! Eleanor's expression, however, shifted from concern to alarm. Daniel, what are you doing? You can't bring a stray dog into our house. It could be dangerous or sick or... Elle, it's dying. Daniel cut her off, his voice low but firm as he reached the door. It won't survive the night out there. Nobody would. Liam was already reaching out to touch the dog's wet fur. He's so cold, Daddy! And skinny? Eleanor pulled her son back. Don't touch it, Liam. We don't know anything about this animal. Daniel stood in the doorway, snow melting off his coat and onto the floor, the nearly lifeless dog in his arms. His eyes met his wife's, pleading. I can't just leave it to die, Elle. Not when Liam saw it. What would that teach him? Eleanor's jaw tightened. She looked from her husband to the pathetic animal in his arms, then to her son's tearful, hopeful face. She sighed heavily. Fine, but it stays in the garage, and we're calling animal control as soon as the storm passes. The garage? Liam protested. But it's cold in there. The garage has a heater. Daniel said quickly, giving Eleanor a grateful nod. "We'll make it comfortable. Thank you, honey." Eleanor didn't look happy, but she stepped aside to let Daniel in. "I'll get some old blankets," she muttered, moving toward the hallway closet. Daniel carried the German Shepherd through the house to the attached garage, Liam following closely behind. The garage was cooler than the house, but still sheltered from the brutal storm outside. Daniel carefully laid the dog down on the concrete floor while Liam hovered anxiously. "Is he gonna be okay, Daddy?" Liam's voice was small with worry. Daniel didn't want to lie to his son. "I don't know, buddy. He's in pretty bad shape." Eleanor appeared with an armful of old blankets. Despite her reservations, her face softened slightly at the sight of the suffering animal. "Here," she said, handing the blankets to Daniel. "These are the ones from the camping trip last year. I was going to donate them anyway." Together, they made a makeshift bed for the dog, who remained eerily still through the process. Only the slight rise and fall of its chest showed it was still alive. "He needs water," Daniel said, standing up. "And maybe some food, though I don't know if he'll be able to eat yet." "I'll get water," Liam volunteered, already running back into the house before his parents could stop him. Eleanor looked at the dog more carefully now. "Daniel, look at how thin he is. This isn't just a dog that got caught in the storm. Someone abandoned him, or he's been lost for weeks." Daniel nodded grimly. "And look at his paws. They're raw. He's been walking for a long time." The dog's eyes had closed completely now. Its breathing was so shallow it was hard to detect. Liam returned with a bowl of water, walking carefully to avoid spilling. "Here, doggy, drink some water." Daniel took the bowl and set it near the dog's muzzle, but the animal showed no interest. Its condition was deteriorating rapidly. "Liam, I think we need to let the dog rest now," Eleanor said gently, putting a hand on her son's shoulder. "It's been through a lot." "But he's not drinking," Liam protested, his voice rising with distress. "He needs to drink." "Sometimes, buddy," Daniel began carefully, "when animals are very sick, they need time before they can eat or drink." Liam's lower lip trembled. "Is he going to die?" Eleanor shot Daniel a pointed look. This was exactly why she hadn't wanted to bring the dog into their home. Having to explain death to their 5-year-old wasn't on her agenda for the evening. "We're doing everything we can," Daniel said, avoiding a direct answer. "The most important thing is that he's warm and safe now, thanks to you spotting him." "Can I stay with him?" Liam asked, his eyes never leaving the motionless dog. "Absolutely not," Eleanor replied immediately. "It's getting late, and you need dinner and a bath before bed." "But he'll be all alone." Liam's eyes filled with tears. Daniel turned on the space heater they kept in the garage, positioning it to warm the dog without overheating it. "The dog needs rest, Liam. We'll check on him again before bedtime, okay?" Liam wasn't happy, but he reluctantly allowed his mother to lead him back into the house. At the door, he turned back for one last look at the German Shepherd lying motionless on the blankets. "Please don't die," he whispered. "Please." Inside, Eleanor tried to create some normalcy by serving the dinner she had prepared earlier, but Liam barely touched his food, his mind clearly on the dog in the garage. "What if he wakes up and he's scared?" he asked, pushing his mashed potatoes around his plate. "What if he doesn't know where he is?" "Dogs have excellent senses," Daniel assured him. "He'll know he's in a safe place." "If he wakes up," Eleanor murmured, too quietly for Liam to hear. The wind outside intensified, rattling the windows. The power flickered again, longer this time, before stabilizing. They all looked up at the lights, reminded of the dangerous storm enveloping their home. "I think it's time for your bath, buddy," Daniel said, noting Liam's untouched dinner. "We'll check on the dog afterward, I promise." Liam reluctantly agreed, and Eleanor took him upstairs for his bath. Daniel seized the opportunity to return to the garage. The dog hadn't moved, but in the warmer air, some of the ice in its fur had melted, revealing more of its condition. It was worse than Daniel had initially thought. The dog's coat was dull and patchy in places. There were old scars visible beneath the fur, and fresh cuts on its paws and legs. Whatever journey had brought this animal to their doorstep, it had been long and brutal. Daniel wet a clean cloth with warm water, and gently began to clean some of the mud and ice from the dog's fur. The animal's eyes flickered open briefly at the touch, then closed again. But Daniel noticed something, the slightest movement of its tail, just once. a weak thump against the blankets. Upstairs, Eleanor helped Liam into his pajamas after his bath, trying to distract him with stories about the snowmen they would build when the storm passed. But Liam's mind was fixated on one thing. "Is Daddy checking on the dog?" he asked as Eleanor buttoned his pajama top. "I'm sure he is," Eleanor sighed, knowing her husband's soft heart all too well. "Now, which story should we read tonight?" "No story," Liam said firmly. "I want to see the dog before bed. You promised." Eleanor knew when she was defeated. "One quick look," she conceded, then straight to bed. They found Daniel still in the garage, sitting on an old stool beside the German Shepherd. He looked up as they entered, his expression unreadable. "How is he?" Liam asked immediately, moving to kneel beside the dog. "He's hanging in there," Daniel replied. "I cleaned him up a bit. He moved his tail earlier." "That's a good sign, right?" Liam's face brightened with hope. "It could be," Daniel said cautiously. "But he's still very weak." Liam reached out and gently stroked the dog's head. "It's okay," he whispered. "You don't have to be scared. I'm here." Eleanor watched her son with a mixture of pride and apprehension. His empathy for the suffering animal was touching, but she worried about his inevitable heartbreak if the dog didn't survive the night. "5 more minutes, Liam," she said softly. "Then bedtime." Liam nodded absently, his attention fully on the dog. He continued to stroke its fur with remarkable gentleness for a 5-year-old, whispering reassurances. And then it happened. The dog's tail moved again. A single weak thump, then another. "Did you see that?" Liam gasped, his eyes wide. "His tail wagged. He can hear me." Daniel and Eleanor exchanged surprised glances. The dog's eyes remained closed, its breathing still shallow, but its tail was definitely responding to Liam's voice. "He likes you," Daniel said, a smile breaking through his concern. Liam beamed with pride. "I'm going to call him Storm," he declared, "because we found him in the snowstorm." Eleanor couldn't help but notice the possessive pronoun. Found him, not it, named him. In Liam's mind, this dog was already more than a stray they'd rescued. It was a he, a being with an identity and a name. "Liam," she began carefully, "remember what we said. Once the storm passes, we need to call animal control. He might belong to someone who's looking for him." "No." Liam's voice was surprisingly firm. "He doesn't have anyone. That's why he was all alone in the snow. He picked us, Mommy. He came to our house." Before Eleanor could correct this interpretation, the dog suddenly began to shiver violently. Its breathing became even more labored, coming in quick, shallow pants. "Daniel?" Eleanor stepped forward, alarmed. "What's happening?" Daniel was already on his feet, his face tight with concern. "I don't know. It doesn't look good." "Mommy, he's dying." Liam's voice rose in panic. "Do something!" Eleanor hesitated only a moment before making a decision. "Bring him into the house," she said. "The garage isn't warm enough." Daniel looked at her in surprise. "Are you sure?" "Just do it," she said, already moving back toward the door. "Liam, go get more blankets from the linen closet, the warm ones." Liam ran into the house while Daniel carefully lifted the trembling dog. The animal felt even lighter now, as if it were fading away in his arms. Inside, they cleared a space near the fireplace in the living room. Daniel gently laid the dog on the rug while Eleanor started a fire. The warmth would be good, but she was more concerned about the dog's dropping temperature and erratic breathing. "I have a medical kit in the bathroom," she said, standing up. "It's for people, not animals, but maybe there's something useful." While Eleanor searched for her kit, Liam returned with an armful of blankets, his favorite teddy bear, perched precariously on top. "I brought Benny too," he explained, setting the stuffed bear next to Storm. "So he knows he's not alone." Daniel helped Liam arrange the blankets around the shivering dog. The fire was beginning to warm the room, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, a different kind of battle was being fought. Eleanor returned with her medical kit and a hot water bottle. "I don't know much about veterinary medicine," she admitted, "but hypothermia is hypothermia. We need to warm him up gradually." She wrapped the hot water bottle in a towel and carefully placed it against the dog's body, then covered it with blankets. "The main thing is to get his core temperature up." For the next hour, they worked together, replacing the cooling water bottle with a fresh hot one, trying to coax the dog to drink a few drops of water, watching anxiously for any sign of improvement or deterioration. Liam refused to leave Storm's side, even though it was well past his bedtime. He sat cross-legged next to the dog, occasionally stroking its fur and whispering encouragement. "Stay with me," he murmured, his small face intense with concentration. "Stay with me." Just when it seemed the dog might be stabilizing, it suddenly went completely still. Its breathing, already shallow, seemed to stop. "Daniel," Eleanor said sharply, her hand on the dog's chest. "I don't think he's breathing." Liam's eyes widened in horror. "No!" he cried, shaking the dog's shoulder gently. "Wake up! Please wake up!" Daniel moved quickly, placing his ear near the dog's muzzle. "I don't feel any breath," he confirmed, his voice tight. "Do something!" Liam begged, tears streaming down his face. "Please, Daddy, do something!" In that moment, with his son's desperate pleas echoing in his ears and the storm howling outside, Daniel made a split-second decision. He positioned his hands on the dog's chest and began compressions, not as hard as he would for a human, but firm enough to try to restart the animal's heart. "Come on," he muttered, pressing rhythmically. "Don't give up now." Eleanor watched, one arm around a sobbing Liam, her own eyes filled with tears. She had never wanted the dog in their house, but watching her son's heart break as the animal died was unbearable. Daniel continued the compressions, sweat beading on his forehead from the effort and the heat of the fire. "Come on, Storm," he urged. "Liam's waiting for you." And then, a miracle. The dog's chest suddenly expanded on its own. A shuddering breath. Then another. "He's breathing!" Daniel exclaimed, sitting back on his heels. "He's breathing again!" Liam scrambled forward, fresh tears, these of relief, streaming down his face. "Storm, you came back!" The dog's eyes remained closed, but its breathing had definitely resumed, more regular now. The violent shivering had subsided as well. "I think we're past the worst," Eleanor said cautiously, checking the dog's heartbeat. It was weak, but steady. "But he's still in critical condition. We need to watch him through the night." Liam's face set with determination. "I'll watch him. I won't let him be alone." Eleanor and Daniel exchanged glances over their son's head. It was late, and Liam needed sleep, but the intensity of his connection to the dog was something neither of them had seen before in their normally easygoing child. "How about this?" Daniel suggested. "We'll make a bed for you here on the couch. That way you can see Storm, but you'll also get some sleep." Liam considered this compromise. "Promise you won't take him away while I'm sleeping?" "We promise," Eleanor said, surprising herself. When had she become invested in this stray dog's survival? "We'll all stay right here tonight." And so, as the storm outside reached its peak, the Carter family settled in for an unexpected vigil. Daniel and Eleanor took turns staying awake, monitoring the dog's condition and adding logs to the fire. Liam eventually fell asleep on the couch, one hand dangling down to touch Storm's fur, as if maintaining that physical connection even in sleep. In the quiet hours of the night, with Liam's soft snores and the crackling fire, the only sounds competing with the howling wind outside, Eleanor found herself studying the German Shepherd more closely. Despite its emaciated state and obvious hardships, there was something noble about the animal, something resilient. It had fought its way through a snowstorm to their doorstep, clinging to life with remarkable tenacity. "You really want to live, don't you?" she whispered to the sleeping dog. "What brought you to us, I wonder?" As if in response, Storm's tail moved slightly. His eyes flickered open briefly, golden eyes that seemed to hold secrets Eleanor couldn't begin to fathom. Then they closed again, but not before Eleanor felt an inexplicable connection to the creature her son had already claimed as their own. Outside, the wind shifted, the snowfall beginning to lighten. The worst of the storm was passing. But for the German Shepherd called Storm, the journey was just beginning. Morning arrived with a blinding whiteness that filled every window of the Carter home. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a transformed world buried under 3 feet of pristine snow. The sun glinted off the endless white expanse, creating a deceptively peaceful scene that hid the dangerous cold still gripping Winterbrook. Eleanor was the first to wake, stiff from spending the night in an armchair. She blinked groggily, momentarily confused by the sight of her son asleep on the couch and her husband dozing in another chair. Then her eyes fell on the German Shepherd lying on their living room floor, and the events of the previous night came rushing back. To her surprise, the dog was awake. He lay perfectly still, but his golden eyes were open, alert and wary, tracking her movement as she sat up. There was an intelligence in that gaze that caught Eleanor off guard, not just awareness, but something deeper, more calculating. "Daniel," she said softly, not wanting to startle either the dog or her sleeping son. "Daniel, wake up." Her husband stirred, rubbing his face as he straightened in his chair. "What time is it?" "Early," Eleanor replied, her eyes still on the dog. "But look who's awake." Daniel turned toward Storm, his tired expression breaking into a relieved smile. "Well, good morning to you too. Didn't think we'd be seeing those eyes open today." The dog's tail thumped weakly against the floor, once, twice, but he made no attempt to rise. His eyes darted between the two adults, cautious, but not fearful. "He looks better," Eleanor admitted. The dog's breathing was more regular now, and though he was still alarmingly thin, some of the lifelessness had left his body. The warmth and rest must have helped. "I'm going to try to get him to drink something," Daniel said, rising carefully so as not to make any sudden movements. "He must be dehydrated." As Daniel made his way to the kitchen, Liam stirred on the couch, his small body stretching before his eyes fluttered open. He looked momentarily confused, then his gaze landed on Storm and his face lit up with pure joy. "You're awake!" he cried, scrambling off the couch and dropping to his knees beside the dog. "Mommy, look!" Storm's eyes are open. "I see that," Eleanor said, watching carefully as her son approached the animal. She still wasn't entirely convinced the dog wasn't dangerous, despite its weakened state. "Be careful, Liam. He might be scared." But Storm showed no sign of aggression as Liam knelt beside him. Instead, the dog's tail wagged with more energy, and he made a feeble attempt to lift his head toward the boy. "He remembers me," Liam whispered in awe, gently stroking the dog's head. "He knows I helped him." Eleanor wasn't convinced the dog remembered anything from his near-death state the night before, but she couldn't deny the animal seemed to have an immediate affinity for her son. It was as if some connection had formed between them during those critical hours. Daniel returned with a shallow bowl of water. "Let's see if he'll drink now," he said, kneeling down and carefully placing the bowl near Storm's muzzle. The dog eyed the water, then looked up at Daniel, as if assessing whether it was safe. "It's okay," Liam encouraged. "It's just water. You must be thirsty." As if understanding the words, Storm slowly, painfully extended his neck and began to lap at the water. His movements were weak but determined. "That's it," Daniel said, smiling at his son. "Good call, buddy." Eleanor watched the scene with mixed emotions. On one hand, she was genuinely relieved the dog had survived the night. On the other, she was increasingly concerned about what would happen next. Liam was already deeply attached to the animal, and it was clear Daniel was quickly heading in the same direction. "We should try to give him a little food," she suggested, practical as always. "Not too much at first, though. His system will be fragile after what he's been through." "Can I feed him?" Liam asked eagerly. Eleanor hesitated. "Let Daddy do it this time. We're still not sure how he'll react." While Daniel went to find something suitable for a starving dog, Eleanor examined Storm more carefully in the morning light. Now that his fur was mostly dry, she could see how beautiful he must have once been. Despite his current state, there was a nobility to his face, an intelligence in his eyes that spoke of good breeding. "You're not just any stray, are you?" she murmured, noting the shape of his head and the proportions of his body. "You belong to someone." Storm watched her steadily, as if acknowledging her assessment. Daniel returned with a small portion of leftover chicken from their dinner, cut into tiny pieces. "This is all I could find that seemed appropriate," he explained. "We'll need to get proper dog food if—" He stopped, glancing at Liam, clearly not wanting to discuss the dog's future in front of their son. Eleanor nodded in understanding. That conversation would have to wait. Liam watched intently as his father offered a small piece of chicken to Storm. The dog sniffed it carefully, then delicately took it from Daniel's palm. He chewed slowly, deliberately, as if it had been a long time since he'd had proper food. "I'll call the vet once the roads are cleared," Eleanor said quietly to Daniel. "He should be examined properly." Daniel nodded. "Good idea. And we should check if anyone's reported a missing German Shepherd. A dog like this, someone must be looking for him. Liam's head snapped up. No, he's not missing. He found us. His small face was suddenly fierce with determination. He picked us, Daddy. He doesn't have anywhere else to go. Eleanor and Daniel exchanged glances over their son's head. They'd need to tread carefully here. Liam had clearly formed a powerful attachment to Storm overnight. Buddy, Daniel began gently, if Storm belongs to another family, they must be very worried about him. Wouldn't you be sad if you lost him and someone else decided to keep him? Liam's lower lip trembled. But he was all alone in the snow. Nobody was looking for him. They left him to die. The last words came out as an anguished cry that made Storm's ears perk up in concern. Eleanor knelt down beside her son, putting an arm around his shoulders. We don't know that, sweetie. He might have gotten lost or run away during the storm. We need to at least check if someone's missing him. They don't deserve him, Liam muttered, burying his face in Storm's fur. They didn't save him. We did. Eleanor looked to Daniel helplessly. How had a simple act of kindness during a snowstorm become so complicated? Let's focus on getting him healthy first, Daniel suggested diplomatically. Then we'll figure out the rest, okay? Liam nodded reluctantly, his hand still stroking Storm's head. The day passed slowly. The world outside remained frozen and still, the town of Winterbrook effectively cut off until the snowplows could clear the roads. Inside, the Carter family fell into a new routine centered around their unexpected guest. Eleanor, despite her initial reluctance, found herself preparing small, frequent meals for Storm. Bits of chicken, some scrambled egg, whatever mild foods they had that seemed suitable for a recovering dog. Daniel rigged up a makeshift bed using cushions and blankets, positioning it near the fireplace where Storm could stay warm. And Liam barely left the dog's side, talking to him constantly, showing him toys, reading him stories, as if Storm could understand every word. By afternoon, Storm had gained enough strength to sit up, though standing was still beyond him. His eyes followed the family's movements around the house, alert and increasingly curious. When Liam played nearby, the dog's gaze never left him, a fact that both touched and slightly unnerved Eleanor. He's protective of him already, she observed to Daniel as they prepared dinner in the kitchen. The way he watches him. Daniel nodded, glancing into the living room where Liam was showing Storm his collection of toy cars. German Shepherds are known for that. They're incredibly loyal, especially to children. Eleanor bit her lip. That's what worries me. Liam's going to be devastated if we have to give him up. I know, Daniel sighed. But what else can we do if he belongs to someone? And if he doesn't? Eleanor found herself asking, surprising both of them. If no one claims him? Daniel looked at his wife with raised eyebrows. Are you saying what I think you're saying? You'd consider keeping him? Eleanor wasn't sure when her feelings had begun to shift. Maybe it was watching her son's extraordinary compassion. Maybe it was the intelligent, grateful look in Storm's eyes. Or maybe it was just the quiet realization that sometimes life brings unexpected changes that you never knew you needed. I'm not saying anything definite, she clarified. Just, let's keep our options open. Daniel smiled, leaning over to kiss her cheek. That's more than I expected, honestly. As evening approached, the family gathered in the living room. The storm had knocked out the cable, so television was out of the question. Instead, they played board games while Storm watched with apparent interest, his condition improving hour by hour. He was still weak, still painfully thin, but the immediate danger seemed to have passed. I wish the snow would melt so we could take Storm for a walk, Liam said as Daniel packed away the Monopoly board. He must want to go outside. That'll be a while, buddy, Daniel replied, glancing out the window at the mountains of snow. But maybe tomorrow we can let him into the backyard for a little bit, if he's feeling stronger. Liam nodded, then suddenly stiffened as a thought struck him. What if there are more dogs out there, in the snow? What if they're waiting for someone to find them, too? Eleanor shared a concerned look with Daniel. I'm sure Storm was an unusual case, sweetie. Most animals know how to find shelter during storms. But what if? Liam began, but was interrupted by a sudden change in Storm's demeanor. The dog's ears had perked up, his body tense. He was staring intently at the front door, a low growl building in his throat. What's wrong with him? Liam asked, alarmed by the transformation in his new friend. Daniel frowned, standing up. I don't know. Maybe he heard something outside. A snowplow? Eleanor suggested. Or maybe some branches falling from the weight of the snow? But Storm was now fully alert, his growl deepening. Despite his weakness, he managed to push himself to his feet, legs trembling with the effort. His eyes never left the door. Daddy? Liam's voice was uncertain now, edging toward fear. He'd never seen Storm like this. Daniel moved cautiously toward the window, peering out into the gathering darkness. The snow reflected what little light remained, creating an eerie blue glow over their front yard. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Then, a movement, a shadow shifting against the whiteness. There's something out there, he said quietly, straining to make out details. Eleanor stood up, instinctively moving closer to Liam. An animal! Daniel squinted through the glass. I can't tell. It might be... He was cut off by Storm's sudden deep bark, surprising in its strength given the dog's condition. The German Shepherd was fully on his feet now, body rigid, hackles raised. Hey, easy boy, Daniel said, trying to calm the dog. It's probably just a deer or something. But Storm wasn't calming down. If anything, his agitation was increasing, his barks becoming more urgent. Liam moved toward Storm, reaching out to touch his fur. What's wrong? What do you see? Liam, stay back, Eleanor warned, suddenly uneasy. There was something unnatural about the dog's reaction, something that spoke of more than just animal curiosity. Daniel continued to search the yard with his eyes. The shadow had disappeared, but Storm's focus on the door never wavered. It was as if he knew something they didn't, could sense a presence they were blind to. I'm going to check the back door, Daniel said, moving toward the kitchen. Make sure everything's locked up. As he left the room, Storm's growls intensified. The dog took a halting step toward the front door, then another, his legs shaking with weakness, but his determination clear. Storm, stay, Eleanor commanded, not knowing if the dog would listen to her, but trying anyway. To her surprise, Storm hesitated, glancing back at her with those intelligent eyes before returning his attention to the door. The family fell into an uneasy silence, punctuated only by Storm's occasional growls. Outside, the world was quieting as night fell, the storm's aftermath creating an unnatural stillness. Daniel returned from checking the back of the house. Everything's secure, he reported. No signs of anything unusual. Could it have been a person? Eleanor asked in a low voice, not wanting to alarm Liam. Someone checking houses? There are always reports of break-ins after big storms when people evacuate. Daniel shrugged, his face troubled. I couldn't see clearly. But why would anyone be out in this? The roads are still impassable. Storm had finally stopped growling, though he remained alert, his attention fixed on the door. Occasionally his ears would twitch, as if catching sounds beyond human hearing. Maybe he was just confused, Eleanor suggested hopefully. He's been through a lot. His senses might be off. Maybe, Daniel agreed, but he didn't sound convinced. As the evening wore on, Storm gradually relaxed, eventually returning to his makeshift bed, though his eyes still frequently drifted toward the door. The family tried to return to normal, but a subtle tension lingered in the air, an unspoken sense that something wasn't quite right. Bedtime came, and for the first time, the question of where Storm would sleep arose. He should stay in my room, Liam declared immediately. He'll be scared alone. Eleanor hesitated. Despite the dog's improved condition and apparent gentleness with Liam, she wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea of leaving her 5-year-old alone all night with an animal they'd known for less than 24 hours. I think Storm should stay down here for tonight, she said firmly. He's still recovering, and he needs space to rest. But, Liam began. Your mom's right, Daniel cut in. Besides, Storm seems to like it by the fireplace. It's warm for him. Liam looked disappointed, but didn't argue further. He knelt beside Storm, wrapping his arms around the dog's neck in a gentle hug. Good night, Storm, he whispered. I'll see you in the morning. Storm nuzzled against the boy, his tail wagging slowly. There was something in the dog's eyes as he looked at Liam, something that went beyond animal affection. It was almost like a promise. Eleanor and Daniel exchanged glances. Neither said it aloud, but both were thinking the same thing. There was something unusual about the bond forming between their son and this dog. After tucking Liam into bed, with multiple assurances that Storm would be fine overnight, Eleanor and Daniel returned downstairs. Storm was still awake, watching them with those intelligent eyes. "What do you make of earlier?" Daniel asked quietly as they sat on the couch. "That reaction to whatever he sensed outside." Eleanor shook her head. "I don't know. It could be anything. Maybe his previous owners were abusive and he's traumatized." "Maybe," Daniel agreed, but something in his tone suggested he wasn't convinced. "There's something about him, Elle. Something different." Eleanor nodded slowly. She'd felt it too. The unusual intelligence in Storm's gaze, the way he seemed to understand their words, the immediate protective bond he'd formed with Liam. "The vet might be able to tell us more," she said finally. "If the roads are clear tomorrow, I'll try to get an appointment." They sat in companionable silence for a while, both lost in thought. Storm watched them steadily from his bed by the fireplace, occasionally glancing toward the front door as if expecting something. Eventually, fatigue from their disrupted night's sleep caught up with them, and they decided to head to bed. Daniel added another log to the fire to keep the room warm for Storm, and Eleanor filled his water bowl. "Good night, Storm," Daniel said, patting the dog's head. "Thanks for picking our house to collapse in front of—" Storm's tail thumped against the floor, and he settled his head on his paws, eyes still alert despite his evident exhaustion. As they turned to leave, Eleanor paused, a sudden thought occurring to her. "Daniel, do you think we should lock our bedroom door tonight, just in case?" Daniel looked at her in surprise. "You mean because of Storm? I don't think he's going to hurt us, Elle. If anything, he seems protective." "I know, it's just—" Eleanor glanced back at the German Shepherd. "We still don't know anything about him, where he came from, what he might have been through." Daniel considered this, then shook his head. "I think we're safe, but we'll leave our door open so we can hear if anything happens, okay?" Eleanor nodded, feeling slightly foolish for her concern. Storm had shown nothing but gentleness since regaining his strength, particularly with Liam. Still, there was something about the dog's reaction earlier that had unsettled her. The intensity of his focus, the certainty that something was out there. Upstairs, they checked on Liam one last time. He was sound asleep, exhausted from the excitement and worry of the past 24 hours. His face was peaceful, one arm wrapped around his teddy bear. "He's going to want to keep him," Daniel whispered as they closed Liam's door partway, leaving it open enough to hear if he called out. "I know," Eleanor sighed. "Let's just take it one day at a time. See what the vet says, check if anyone's reported a missing dog." They retired to their own room, leaving both their door and Liam's ajar. The house settled into nighttime silence, broken only by the occasional pop from the fireplace downstairs and the persistent howl of the wind outside. Still strong, even though the snow had stopped falling, Eleanor found sleep elusive, her mind replaying the events of the day. The dog's miraculous recovery, Liam's instant attachment, Storm's strange reaction to something outside. It all swirled in her thoughts, keeping her hovering on the edge of consciousness. She was just finally drifting off when a sound jerked her back to alertness. A scratching noise, followed by the distinct click of a door opening. Eleanor sat up, instantly awake. "Daniel," she whispered, shaking her husband's shoulder. "Did you hear that?" Daniel stirred groggily. "Hear what?" "I think I heard the front door," she hissed, already climbing out of bed and reaching for her robe. That got Daniel's attention. He was immediately alert, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. "Stay here," he instructed. "I'll check." "No way," Eleanor replied, tying her robe around her waist. "I'm coming with you." Together, they moved quietly into the hallway. Their first stop was Liam's room. Eleanor peered in, relieved to see the small lump under the covers, undisturbed. Liam was still asleep, breathing deeply. They proceeded cautiously down the stairs, Daniel leading the way. The living room came into view, illuminated by the dying embers in the fireplace. Storm's bed was empty. "Where is he?" Eleanor whispered, scanning the room. There was no sign of the German Shepherd. Daniel moved further into the room, checking behind furniture. "Storm?" he called softly. "Where'd you go, boy?" A sudden chill made Eleanor shiver. She looked toward the front door. It was open, just a crack, but definitely open. "Daniel," she said, her voice tight with alarm. "The door." Daniel turned, his eyes widening as he saw what she'd noticed. "I know I locked it. I always do." "Could Storm have opened it somehow?" Eleanor suggested, though it seemed impossible. The door had a deadbolt that required turning, not just a simple latch. They approached the door cautiously. Daniel pushed it open wider, peering out into the night. The porch light illuminated a small area of their snow-covered yard, but beyond that was darkness. "Storm!" Daniel called, a bit louder now. "Storm, come here!" Nothing. No response, no movement in the snow. "I don't understand," Eleanor said, hugging herself against the cold air flowing in through the open door. How could he get out? And why would he want to? He could barely stand earlier. Daniel shook his head, equally puzzled. "I don't know, but we need to find him. He won't survive another night out there in his condition." "Should we wake Liam?" Eleanor asked, torn between the need to search for the dog and not wanting to alarm their son. "No, let him sleep," Daniel decided. "One of us should stay here anyway, in case Storm comes back, or in case—" He didn't finish the thought, but Eleanor understood. In case whatever Storm had sensed earlier was real. "I'll stay with Liam," she said. "You take a flashlight and check around the house. But Daniel, be careful. It's freezing out there, and we don't know what spooked Storm earlier." Daniel nodded, already reaching for his coat and boots. He grabbed a powerful flashlight from the drawer and a woolen hat. "I won't go far, just around the property." As Daniel stepped out into the frigid night, Eleanor closed and locked the door behind him, then moved to the window to watch his progress. The beam of his flashlight cut through the darkness, sweeping across their snow-covered yard. She could see his footprints forming in the deep snow as he moved cautiously away from the house. Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Storm had been too weak to stand for long periods just hours ago. How had he managed to not only get up, but somehow open a deadbolted door and venture out into the freezing night? And why would he leave the warmth and safety of their home, especially given how attached he'd seemed to Liam? A sudden thought made her blood run cold. What if someone had taken him? What if the shadow they had glimpsed earlier was a person, someone who had been looking for Storm specifically? The sound of little feet on the stairs made Eleanor turn. Liam stood there in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes sleepily. "Mommy, where's Storm?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep. "I went to check on him, but he's not in his bed." Eleanor forced a reassuring smile. "Storm needed to go outside for a bit. Daddy's helping him." Liam frowned, clearly not buying this explanation. "In the middle of the night? Dogs sometimes need to go out at odd times," Eleanor said, trying to sound casual. "Come on, let's get you back to bed. Storm will be back soon." But Liam wasn't so easily diverted. He moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. "Why does Daddy have a flashlight? Is Storm lost again?" Before Eleanor could formulate a convincing answer, a bark shattered the quiet night, loud, urgent, and unmistakably Storm's. It was followed immediately by a shout from Daniel. Eleanor rushed to the window, Liam right beside her. In the yard, Daniel's flashlight beam was swinging wildly. She could make out his figure, and next to him, the dark shape of Storm. But they weren't alone. There was something else out there, something moving in the shadows beyond the reach of Daniel's light. "What is that, Mommy?" Liam whispered, his face pressed against the glass. "What's out there with Daddy and Storm?" Eleanor squinted, trying to make sense of the shifting shadows. "I don't know, sweetie." Another bark from Storm, deeper and more menacing than before. Daniel's voice called out, though Eleanor couldn't make out the words. Then more movement, faster now. Storm was running, no, charging, towards something at the edge of their property. Despite his weakened state, the dog moved with surprising speed and purpose. "Storm!" Liam cried, pressing his hands against the window. "Storm, come back!" Eleanor wrapped an arm around her son, her own heart racing with fear. What was happening out there? Daniel's flashlight beam followed Storm, illuminating a dark figure at the tree line, a person, someone in a black coat, standing perfectly still as the German Shepherd charged toward them. Who would be out in their yard in the middle of a freezing night after a historic snowstorm? And why? As Storm reached the figure, something unexpected happened. Instead of attacking, the dog stopped abruptly, just feet away from the mysterious person. His barking ceased. For a long moment, dog and figure regarded each other in a strange, silent standoff. Then slowly, deliberately, the figure raised a hand toward Storm, not in fear or defense, but almost like a greeting, a recognition. "Mommy," Liam whispered, his voice filled with confusion and fear. Who is that person? Do they know Storm? Eleanor didn't answer. She couldn't. Because in that moment, with the moonlight reflecting off the snow and Daniel's flashlight partially illuminating the scene, she had caught a glimpse of the figure's face, and what she saw made no sense at all, because there was no face, just darkness where features should be. And then, as Daniel called out again and began to trudge through the deep snow toward them, both the figure and Storm suddenly vanished into the tree line, leaving nothing but disturbed snow in their wake. Let us know in the comments if you would have the courage to follow Storm and the mysterious figure into the darkness. What do you think the shadow without a face could be? Liam, get away from the window, now. Eleanor's voice was calm but firm as she pulled her son back from the glass. Her mind was racing, trying to process what she had just seen, or thought she had seen. The shadowy figure with no face couldn't be real. It had to be a trick of the light, an illusion created by the moonlight and snow. But Storm, Liam protested, straining to see into the darkness. Daddy will find him, Eleanor assured him, though she wasn't at all certain of this. I need you to go upstairs to your room and stay there until I come get you. No! Liam's voice rose in panic. Storm needs me. That person took him. Eleanor knelt down, gripping her son's shoulders gently but firmly. Liam, listen to me. We don't know what's happening, but I need you safe while we figure it out. Please go to your room. Tears welled in Liam's eyes, but something in his mother's expression must have convinced him of the seriousness of the situation. He nodded reluctantly and headed for the stairs, glancing back repeatedly as if hoping Storm would suddenly reappear. Once Liam was upstairs, Eleanor grabbed her coat and boots, her heart pounding. She knew she should stay inside with Liam, but she couldn't leave Daniel out there alone, not after what she'd seen. She quickly locked the front door behind her and hurried into the yard, following Daniel's footprints in the snow. The cold hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath. Daniel, she called, her voice sounding small and muffled in the vast whiteness. Daniel, where are you? Over here! His voice came from the direction of the tree line. Eleanor followed the sound, struggling through snow that reached above her knees in places. She found Daniel standing at the edge of the woods that bordered their property, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness between the trees. His face was flushed from cold and exertion, his breath creating clouds in the frigid air. Did you see where they went? Eleanor asked, coming up beside him. Daniel turned to her, his expression troubled. They disappeared into the trees. I tried to follow, but the snow's too deep in there without proper gear. He paused, studying her face. Elle, did you see that person? Did you see their face? Eleanor hesitated. She wasn't sure how to describe what she'd seen without sounding crazy. I couldn't make out any features, she said carefully. It was too dark. Daniel nodded slowly. Same here, just a dark shape. But Storm? He shook his head in disbelief. He ran straight to them, Elle, like he knew them. And he was moving like he wasn't injured at all. A gust of wind cut through their coats, making them both shiver. The temperature was dropping rapidly now that night had fully settled in. We need to go back inside, Eleanor said reluctantly. It's too cold, and Liam's alone in the house. Daniel looked torn, glancing back at the dark woods. But Storm? Daniel, we can't track them in the dark. Not in these conditions. We'd be risking our lives. She put a hand on his arm. We'll call for help in the morning, when it's light. After a moment's hesitation, Daniel nodded, though his face showed his reluctance. You're right. Let's go back. They trudged through the snow toward their home, both lost in thought. Eleanor couldn't stop seeing that blank space where a face should have been. It didn't make sense. People had faces. It must have been the hood of a coat, or a mask of some kind. There had to be a logical explanation. Back inside, they found Liam waiting at the top of the stairs, his face streaked with tears. Did you find Storm? He asked, his voice small and hopeful. Daniel and Eleanor exchanged glances. They had agreed, without words, not to tell Liam about the faceless figure. Not yet anyway. Not yet, buddy, Daniel said gently. But Storm is a smart dog. He might come back on his own once he's done exploring. He wouldn't leave us, Liam insisted, coming down the stairs. That person took him. I saw them. Eleanor put an arm around her son's shoulders. We don't know that, sweetie. Maybe Storm just remembered something he needed to do. Even to her own ears, the explanation sounded weak and unconvincing. Liam clearly wasn't buying it either, his small face scrunched in skepticism. "Dogs don't just have errands to run, Mom," he said with the blunt logic of a child. "Something's wrong. I can feel it." Eleanor and Daniel looked at each other over Liam's head, both recognizing the unusual maturity in their son's assessment. He was right, of course. Something was very wrong, though none of them could begin to guess what it was. "It's late," Daniel said finally. "We all need some sleep. In the morning, we'll look for Storm properly, the whole town if we have to." It took nearly an hour to get Liam settled back in bed. He was convinced that Storm needed his help, that something terrible was happening. Only after both parents promised repeatedly that they would begin searching at first light did he finally, reluctantly, close his eyes. Back in their own bedroom, Daniel and Eleanor spoke in hushed tones, trying to make sense of the night's events. "I don't understand any of this," Eleanor admitted, sitting on the edge of the bed. "How did Storm get the door open? Where did that person come from? And why would Storm go with them willingly?" Daniel ran a hand through his hair, his fatigue evident in every movement. Maybe Storm did know them. Maybe it was his owner. In the middle of the night, during a record-breaking snowstorm? Eleanor shook her head. And if it was his owner, why not just knock on our door like a normal person? Daniel had no answer for that. They both knew there was something deeply unsettling about the entire situation. Storm's miraculous recovery from near death, his strange behavior, the mysterious figure in the dark, none of it added up to anything that made sense. "We should try to get some sleep," Daniel suggested, though he looked as if he doubted either of them would manage it. "Tomorrow, we'll call the police, check with neighbors. Someone must know something." Eleanor nodded, though she couldn't shake the feeling that what they were dealing with went beyond something the local police could help with. There had been something unnatural about that figure, something that made her skin crawl to remember. Sleep, when it finally came, was fitful and filled with disturbing dreams. Eleanor found herself running through endless snow, chasing a dog that was always just out of reach. Behind her, something followed, something without a face. She woke with a gasp just before dawn, her heart racing. Daniel was already up, standing by the window with a cup of coffee, looking out at their snow-covered yard. The first pale light of morning revealed no new tracks, no sign of Storm's return. "Nothing?" Eleanor asked, though she already knew the answer. Daniel shook his head. "I've been watching since first light, not a movement." They checked on Liam, finding him still asleep, his face finally peaceful after his troubled night. They decided to let him rest a bit longer while they made some calls. The phone lines were working again, though the internet was still down. Daniel called the local police first, reporting the strange night visitor and Storm's disappearance. The officer who took the call sounded skeptical. "A lot of animals got disoriented in the storm, sir," he explained. "And as for the person you saw, it was probably just someone checking that their neighbors' houses were okay. We've had reports of that all over town." "At midnight? In 3 feet of snow?" Daniel pressed, his frustration evident. "And this person didn't have a—" He stopped himself, aware of how crazy it would sound to report a faceless figure. "They were acting suspiciously," he amended. The officer promised to have a patrol car drive by when the roads were cleared, but it was clear he didn't consider their case a priority. Next, they called the local animal shelter and veterinary offices, describing Storm and asking if anyone had reported a missing German shepherd. No one had. By the time Liam woke up, they had exhausted their immediate options. His first word upon entering the kitchen was predictable. "Storm?" Eleanor shook her head gently. "Not yet, sweetie, but we're looking." Liam's face fell, but there was determination there too. "We need to go find him, now." Daniel looked out the window at the still unplowed roads. "As soon as we can get out, buddy, we will. The snowplows should be coming through soon." "We can't wait!" Liam's voice rose in distress. "What if he's hurt? What if that person is hurting him?" Eleanor and Daniel exchanged glances. They'd been avoiding saying anything definitive about the mysterious figure, hoping it would fade from Liam's memory. Clearly it hadn't. "Liam," Eleanor said carefully, "we don't know that person was trying to hurt Storm. Maybe they were trying to help him." "Then why didn't they come to the door?" Liam demanded, his logic once again cutting straight to the heart of the matter. "Why did they hide in the dark?" Neither parent had a good answer for that. Liam's intuition about the wrongness of the situation matched their own unspoken fears. Just as Daniel was about to respond, a sound from outside caught their attention, the rumble of heavy machinery. They looked out the window to see a snowplow making its way down their street, clearing a path wide enough for vehicles. "They're clearing the roads," Daniel said, relief evident in his voice. "Once they're done, we can take the car and look for Storm." "Where?" Eleanor asked quietly, not wanting to dampen Liam's renewed hope, but needing to be practical. "The woods cover miles. He could be anywhere." "We'll start at the edge where we last saw him," Daniel decided. "Look for tracks. Maybe talk to neighbors, see if anyone noticed anything unusual last night." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all they had. After a hasty breakfast, they bundled up in their warmest clothes and prepared to venture out. Liam insisted on bringing Storm's water bowl and some leftover chicken, convinced they would find him and he would be hungry. The world outside was transformed. The snow that had seemed so threatening during the storm now sparkled in the morning sunlight, pristine and beautiful. The plows had created walls of snow on either side of the road, but at least now they could drive. Their first stop was the edge of the woods, where Storm and the figure had disappeared. In daylight, with fresh snow covering any tracks from the night before, it looked ordinary, just a line of evergreens and bare deciduous trees marking the boundary between their yard and the forest beyond. "There should be footprints," Daniel said, frowning as he surveyed the unbroken snow. "From last night." Eleanor nodded slowly, a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature running down her spine. "The snow stopped falling hours before we saw them. There should definitely be tracks." Liam, oblivious to this disturbing detail, was already trudging toward the trees, calling Storm's name. His parents followed, exchanging worried glances. The absence of tracks made no sense, unless they had both imagined the entire encounter. But that was impossible. They had both seen the same thing. The forest was eerily quiet as they moved between the trees, their voices the only sound as they called for Storm. The snow wasn't as deep here, protected somewhat by the canopy above, but it was still difficult going. Liam forged ahead with the single-minded determination of a child on a mission, stopping occasionally to call Storm's name, his voice echoing among the silent trees. They had been searching for nearly an hour when Liam suddenly stopped, pointing excitedly. "Look! Look, Daddy!" Daniel followed his son's finger to a patch of disturbed snow beneath a large oak tree. Moving closer, they could see definite paw prints, large ones, consistent with a German shepherd. "Good eye, buddy," Daniel said, examining the tracks. "These look fresh." The tracks led deeper into the woods, following no obvious path. Without discussion, the family began to follow them, a renewed sense of purpose in their steps. The paw prints were clear and easy to follow, as if Storm had been moving with confidence, knowing exactly where he was going. "There should be human footprints too," Eleanor pointed out quietly to Daniel as they walked. "If that person took him..." Daniel nodded, his brow furrowed. "I know, it doesn't make sense." They continued following the tracks, the forest growing denser around them. Liam's earlier enthusiasm was beginning to wane as fatigue set in, but he refused to turn back, his determination to find Storm unwavering. And then, suddenly, the tracks stopped. Not gradually, not veering off in another direction. They simply ended, as if Storm had vanished into thin air. The family stood in a small clearing, turning in circles as they tried to make sense of the abrupt disappearance. "Where did he go?" Liam asked, his voice small in the vast silence of the forest. Daniel knelt down, examining the snow where the tracks ended. There was no sign of disturbance, no indication that Storm had jumped or been lifted. The tracks simply stopped. "I don't understand," he admitted, looking up at Eleanor with confusion in his eyes. Eleanor was about to respond when a sound reached them, distant but unmistakable. A bark, Storm's bark. Liam's head snapped up. "Storm!" he shouted, immediately moving in the direction of the sound. "Storm! We're here!" "Liam, wait!" Eleanor called, but her son was already running, his small legs carrying him surprisingly fast through the snow. Daniel and Eleanor had no choice but to follow, calling for him to slow down. The forest seemed to close in around them as they ran, the trees growing closer together, the light dimming despite the clear morning sky above. Eleanor felt a growing sense of disorientation, as if the woods were somehow larger on the inside than they appeared from the outside. Another bark, closer now. Liam picked up speed, darting between trees with a nimbleness that his parents couldn't match. They were falling behind, losing sight of him in the increasingly dense forest. "Liam!" Daniel shouted, alarm evident in his voice. "Liam, stop!" But their son was beyond hearing or heeding their calls. The only voice he was responding to was Storm's, which continued to sound at intervals, drawing him deeper into the woods. Eleanor was beginning to panic, her breath coming in gasps that had nothing to do with the exertion of running through snow. They had lost sight of Liam. In these woods, in this cold, that could be disastrous. "Liam!" she screamed, her voice breaking with fear. "Liam, answer me!" Silence. No response from Liam, no more barks from Storm, just the oppressive quiet of the winter forest. Daniel was scanning the snow frantically, trying to pick up Liam's trail. There! His footprints! He pointed, already moving in the direction his son had taken. They followed the small tracks at a run, calling Liam's name continuously. The forest seemed to be playing tricks on them, paths appearing and disappearing, sounds echoing from unexpected directions. Eleanor had lived near these woods all her life, but suddenly they felt alien and threatening. And then, just as suddenly as they had lost him, they found Liam. He was standing in another small clearing, perfectly still, staring at something ahead of him. Relief flooded through Eleanor at the sight of her son, safe and unharmed. "Liam!" she cried, rushing toward him. "You can't run off like that. We were so worried." But Liam didn't respond, didn't even turn to acknowledge them. He continued to stare straight ahead, his small body rigid. Daniel reached him first, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Buddy, what's wrong?" Slowly Liam raised an arm and pointed. Following his finger, Eleanor and Daniel finally saw what had captured their son's attention so completely. In the center of the clearing stood a small, dilapidated cabin. It was old, the wood weathered to a silvery gray, the roof sagging under the weight of snow. It looked like it had been abandoned for decades, yet there was smoke rising from the chimney and fresh footprints in the snow leading to the door. Paw prints, Storm's paw prints. "He's in there," Liam whispered, still staring at the cabin. "Storm's in there." Eleanor felt a wave of unease wash over her. There was something deeply wrong about this cabin, something that made her want to grab Liam and run in the opposite direction. But before she could act on this instinct, the cabin door creaked open. Storm bounded out, looking healthier and stronger than seemed possible given his condition just a day earlier. His coat gleamed in the filtered sunlight, his movements fluid and powerful. He barked once, joyfully at the sight of Liam, and raced toward the boy. Liam's face broke into a wide smile as he knelt to receive the dog, wrapping his arms around Storm's neck as the German shepherd licked his face enthusiastically. "You're okay," Liam cried, burying his face in the dog's fur. "I knew we'd find you." Eleanor and Daniel stood frozen, watching the reunion, but unable to take their eyes off the open cabin door. Someone had let Storm out. Someone was inside. As if in response to their unspoken tension, a figure appeared in the doorway. Tall, wrapped in a dark coat, face hidden in shadow beneath a hood. The same mysterious presence from the night before. "Who are you?" Daniel called, instinctively stepping in front of his wife and son. "What are you doing with our dog?" The figure remained silent, motionless in the doorway. Storm, seemingly oblivious to the adult's fear, continued to lavish affection on Liam, his tail wagging happily. "Daniel," Eleanor whispered, unable to take her eyes off the silent figure. "I don't think—" The hooded person finally moved, taking a single step forward and raising a hand in what might have been a beckoning gesture. The movement caused the hood to shift slightly, allowing a shaft of sunlight to illuminate what lay beneath. Nothing. Empty space where a face should be. Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Daniel took an involuntary step back, his face draining of color. What they were seeing was impossible, a hallucination brought on by stress and lack of sleep. It had to be. But Liam, looking up from Storm, showed no fear at the sight of the faceless figure. Instead, a look of recognition crossed his face. "You saved him?" he said simply, addressing the impossible being as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You saved Storm when he was hurt." The figure inclined its head, or where its head should be, in what seemed like acknowledgement. Storm left Liam's side and trotted back to the faceless entity, sitting calmly beside it like a well-trained companion. "Liam," Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Come here, right now." But Liam didn't move. He was watching Storm and the figure with a strange expression. Not fear, but curiosity. Fascination, even. "What are you?" he asked the figure directly, with a child's bluntness. The being didn't speak, at least not in any way that Eleanor and Daniel could hear. But something passed between it and Liam, some form of communication that left the boy nodding solemnly. "Liam?" Daniel's voice was tense with fear for his son. "What's happening? What is that thing saying to you?" Liam turned to his parents, his expression oddly serene. "It's okay," he assured them. "They're not going to hurt us. They're Storm's friend." "What do you mean, Storm's friend?" Eleanor asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Liam, please, come away from there." The boy looked back at the faceless figure, then to his parents again. "They say Storm belongs to someone important, someone who died. They've been looking for him since the snowstorm started." Daniel and Eleanor exchanged bewildered glances. How was Liam understanding this creature? There were no words being spoken, no gestures they could interpret. "Liam," Daniel began carefully, "I know this seems real to you, but—" "They're showing me pictures," Liam interrupted, tapping his temple. "In my head, like a movie." He turned back to the figure. Who died? Who did Storm belong to? Again, that silent communication. Liam's eyes widened slightly, and he nodded as if something was being confirmed. "A soldier," he said, turning back to his parents. "Storm belonged to a soldier named Caleb, but someone hurt Caleb, and Storm ran away." He looked down at the German shepherd, who was watching him intently. "He was trying to find help when we found him." Eleanor felt dizzy. This was beyond her understanding, beyond anything that made sense in her orderly world. A faceless entity communicating telepathically with her 5-year-old son about a dead soldier and his dog? It sounded like the plot of a supernatural thriller, not something happening to her family in broad daylight.